Yeah, thank you very much. And yeah, just to explain where I'm from the Worldwide Fund for Nature, or WWF, or maybe many of you know the panda logo. So you see, yeah, the main aspect we are treating with that's the conservation of biodiversity. WWF is yeah, long active organization founded in 1961. Mainly dealing with nature conservation issues, but now has broadened its work on other topics like climate change, and also working on issues about plastic waste in the ocean. So that's the topic I'm going to talk about. That's a photo I took in Vietnam in mangrove forest of a nice island called Con Dao. Which has some beaches which are nesting area for sea turtles. But you see this area, the mangrove area, is highly contaminated with plastic, and this plastic is not from the island itself. Plastic is coming from the sea, so you can see what's already in our ocean, and then what's deposited on the beach and shoreline areas. So what I'm talking about is more general about macroplastic, but of course, I guess everybody knows all macroplastic will be degrade in the next hundreds or thousands of years, more or less into microplastic. So macroplastic is one of the important source of microplastic. So the main aspects I'm talking about today is about the production of macroplastic and yeah, the effects macroplastic has, and possible interventions we can do, possible solutions to solve the input of plastic into nature. But looking in the future, this is not so bright, the future regarding the pollution with plastic, because the production of plastic is increasing steadily, about 4 to 5% per year. And still more and more used, especially for single-use products like packaging, so that a huge share of plastic is becoming waste in a very short time, and that's waste which has to be dealt with. So in general speaking, the pathways of plastic, it can be seen here. So in most cases, we have mineral oil as a source of virgin plastic, and then several products are designed out of it. So a huge share also of packaging. Also, when we are looking at renewable sources, also called bioplastic, there's a very low percentage of bioplastic, which is also biodegradable, then degrades faster than the conventional plastic. So most of the mineral oil or renewable source or bio-based plastics then used for products. And so we have to think about the disposal, and yeah, a very low percentage of this plastic material is really recycled in some kind of a closed loop. That means that, let's say, kind of similar use for plastic is intended, and so the plastic is in some kind of closed loop. Mostly it's downgrading or cascading, as it is written here, so using for other purposes, especially not for food grade, but also for other purposes. But most of the plastic waste is incinerated, mainly in industrialized countries, and a lot of plastic waste is going to landfill. So we have, since the 1950s, about 5 billion, nearly 5 billion tons of plastic, which is now has been put into landfill or has entered nature. So we have a huge share of leakage into nature, about 30% or more than 30%. And the amount of biodegradable plastic, the share is very, very low. So why, or what was the reason why WWF has been looking at this issue? Of course, the plastic is harming ecosystems and biodiversity. So you have a lot of damage to ecosystem, especially coral reef. So if these coral reefs are covered with plastic, they will be damaged, or if they're ingesting microplastic, also a damage can be seen. And the researchers at the moment are looking in which way also these microplastic might have or also negative effects on corals and increasing coral bleaching. So that's a topic of the scientific research at the moment. And of course, you know, these pictures from entanglement of whales or sea turtles, and also in ingestion, so that seabirds are taking these plastic waste, which is floating in the ocean for food, and so their intestinal tract or their stomach is filled with plastic, and they do not eat other things, and you have, let's say, some kind of physical, but also some kind of chemical damage of the intestinal tracts of these birds, and so often they died, and so this is quite a huge let's say a part of the stress our ecosystems and our species have to face. So I want to talk a little bit about the causes. What you here see is the landfill. I think that's common in many countries, or better to say it's a dump site. Often you have illegal dump sites or other kinds of dump site, but it's not such kind of sanitary landfill that that is secured in somehow, so that no wastewater is entering the groundwater, or that no wind is taking away the plastic waste. So in this case, it's nearby the shoreline of an ocean, and if it's windy, then the plastic waste is then put by the wind into the ocean. So this is not a secured landfill, and you often have many of these landfills. And if these landfills are beside rivers, so if it's rainy, if we have a rainy season, a share of these dump sites will be then taken away by the flood and entering rivers and then the ocean. So that's the reason why the main input of plastic into the ocean is coming from land, mainly dumped into rivers. So when people are throwing their waste directly into canals and rivers, but also when there's a rainy season, dump sites are washed away, and so rivers are an important source of plastic waste, which is then entering the ocean. So maybe maybe this is what I presented by now is more or less common knowledge. I want to go a bit deeper into it. Why do we have this situation? And here you see that if we are looking at the collection of waste, we see that in the developing country or in the poor countries, the share of waste which is being collected is very low. So not 50%, below 50% is the collection rate of waste. So you can imagine that what's happening with this plastic waste. And so you see it's dumped into rivers, it's littered somewhere else, buried in the garden, or what's often been done is open burning. So these dump sites, there is an open burning of the dump sites or waste, which is then dumped somewhere else. And this open burning is a source of heavy, toxic, hazardous emissions. So that's also one important reason to stop this treatment of waste. So to stop this open burning of waste, because it has many consequences for human health and for other social indicators. So what the first thing which has to be done is to increase the collection rate, so that we get some kind of grip on this plastic waste, so that is not thrown into canals or on dump sites. Now, here you see a calculation which has been done and published in the Science Journal. And this was a try to estimate how much plastic is entering the ocean. So what has been done is looking at the shoreline, how many people are living there, and how's the quality of the waste management system. So what I mentioned before, the share of waste which is collected, which is uncollected or mismanaged. And mismanaged means also that the plastic waste is put on dump sites. And the calculation here is about, let's say, from 5 to 12 million tons of plastic waste are entering the oceans. There are now higher numbers have been published. So scientists have calculated about 19 million tons are entering the ocean. And we have, in summary, we have an amount of plastic waste from 80 to 150 million tons, which is already in the oceans. And you can imagine now this plastic waste is now degrading into microplastic, and scientific research shows that microplastic is everywhere. So 10 millions alone in the Atlantic. There was an estimation of a scientific research which has been done. And everywhere where you look, you will find microplastic, and you have different pathways. It's not only then macroplastic degrading into microplastic, it's also transported by rivers, but also by wind. So we have also aerial depositions of microplastics. And within this map, you have several hotspots of plastic accumulated in the ocean or in the sea. So the Mediterranean is a hotspot. Then the coastline around China, Indonesia, this spot there is also a hotspot of plastic pollution there. So what can we do? Of course, the first step, what we can do is to reduce the consumption of plastic and single-use plastic and packaging. So this study has been done by Systemic and published last year. And I think it's very straightforward, looking at a time frame which covers a year until 2040. And so Systemic calculated then what can we do to reduce the amount of plastic which is entering nature. So it's a global view we have here. And you see that we need really a high share on reduction. And this really means eliminate plastic packaging. So then introduce returnable system, new delivery models, and other reuse models, so that no more single-use packaging is used, but also substitute is a major share of it, recycling to improve the material so that this can be recycled better. But this is quite difficult to do, because at the moment plastic material is quite a composition of very different material, very different ingredient stuff. So it's difficult to collect it, to sort it, and to recycle it, to make good products out of it. But however, if you're doing all these measures in this system change scenario, we will still have a 10% share of mismanaged waste. And this is really alarming. So this will not stop the mismanagement of waste immediately. So there's still a part or share left what we can do. So the task is really huge we have here. So what's important, I talked about the mismanaged waste and that a lot of waste is not collected. I would like to put the focus on the financing of the operating costs of waste management. And here you see that's a publication from the World Bank, that in low-income countries, the share which has been spent for solid waste management in low-income countries and middle-income countries is very high. So a lot of the municipal budget is spent for waste management, and you can imagine that you cannot collect high fees for waste collection from those people there. So the money is needed for other issues, or for building of hospitals and streets. So you need another source to finance the operating costs for waste management. And here the approach is the extended producer responsibility. That means that the companies which are introducing packaging into the market, they have to pay for the collection, treatment, and sorting of the plastic waste. This is not the case in many, many countries. This is the case in Germany since the beginning of the 1990s. This has not reduced the amount of packaging which we have on the market here in Germany. It's still increasing, but it had shifted a bit the responsibility for the collection of packaging waste, and also this means the financing for this has shifted the responsibility to the companies which are introducing the packaging waste into the market. But so our aim is to say that this is very beneficial for countries where the budget is very low and where the people cannot spend so much money on waste collection fees, so that all the companies, and those are mainly the same companies which are active on the global market here, that they have to pay for the collection of waste. So that's the issue of waste extended producer responsibility. In Germany, around 1 billion euros of license fees is collected here, and we estimated the figures for countries in Southeast Asia. It's also around 500 or 300 million dollars per year, which can be collected from those companies. It will not make the products more expensive, so the effect on the product's price is very low. So this is a way forward then to get this operating cost of the waste management system financed, and this is the first step, of course, to collect after prevention, of course, what I mentioned before. So let's say after 5 years, we were thinking within WWF, what can we do? Let's say to be beneficial for all those activities. Of course, you have a lot of other organizations which have been already active in the field of waste management and prevention of waste. So we thought, okay, we are a global organization. So we have a global network. We can do something which uses the global network, but also we have regional activities. That means that we, in many countries, especially in Southeast Asia, where the focus is of this pollution of plastic with plastic waste, we have regional offices or national offices there. So and we have a network of contacts to businesses, to the corporate sector, which have a lot to do with packaging. So we have these 3 pillars. That means we are talking to businesses. We have an approach on a global plastics policy, so using our global network, what I will explain in a few minutes. And these Plastic Smart Cities network is dealing with regional activities together with cities in specific countries. So that's the work on several levels we do. What we want is an international agreement, and this is negotiated at the moment at the UNEA, from the United Nations. And there will be a conference, UNEA 5 in February, where we hope that there will be a decision that the United Nations will get a mandate to negotiate an international agreement. And this means that all countries or all participating countries agree on reducing or stopping the input of plastic into the oceans from their countries. So that's let's say common understanding of this agreement, and several other measures within this agreement will follow how to help those countries which have a not so well developed waste management system. And then we have for specific countries national strategies. That means we are talking to the national politicians, to the government. And what's very important for us then to help or to make some kind of consultation around the legal framework for extended producer responsibility. So that is very important that there's some kind of legal framework that all companies which are introducing packaging into the market have to pay for this, and this needs a lot of monitoring and surveys and implementation, of course, of the new infrastructure for separate waste collection. And then we have in some countries local model projects. That means that we are trying to improve a waste management system in a specific region or specific cities, which then can be used for other regions, but of course then can be used as a model project for the implementation of extended producer responsibility and national rollout of separate waste collection. And overall, you see it on the right side, we try to reduce the amount of single-use plastic. That means having activities on reduction of single-use plastic use, like in restaurants or like with the hotel sector. So that what we did with this support of an international agreement, we produced a map, the Global Plastic Navigator, where you can see which countries are at the moment supportive of this international agreement. So there will be starting international activities in September by Germany, Ghana, Ecuador, and Vietnam. So discussing with other countries to jump on the activity to support an international agreement. We made a campaign, a global petition, since several let's say, since 3 years. So getting more than 2 million supporters for an international agreement. And of course, we produce material then for these attendees to do some kind of advocacy work, why it's important and why we need an international agreement. And also some of our international network have been present at the UNEA conferences in the years before. And then the second pillar we have is this extended producer responsibility project. That means we are producing material for the governments and for the corporate sector. In which way this can be implemented. So the implementation will be different from country to country. You cannot copy a model from one country, let's say from Germany to another one. So, but you have specific principles to establish a producer EPR system. And so already for Vietnam, we developed an implementation plan, how this can be done, how then to switch from a, let's say, mismanaged of waste or missing separate collection then to an extended producer responsibility with separate collection, sorting and recycling of plastic waste. But it's a lot of work which has to be done. And then so the last level, the regional level, we have the Plastic Smart Cities Network, cooperation with the UN Habitat, also dealing on a regional level. Our activities from WWF are mostly focused on the Mediterranean or on Southeast Asia. And that means we are talking to municipalities to agree on an action plan to reduce the amount of plastic waste and to reduce the input of plastic into nature. And in some cases, this leads then to local model project. And so that's really then the activity on the ground. Here's an example from the Mekong Delta. I mentioned that rivers are very important to address because a lot of plastic waste entering the ocean via rivers. And what we found there in the Mekong Delta, where insufficient finance for waste management, they try to burn a bit of the waste with these small ovens, which is quite not so good for the environment because you have no filters at all. But these ovens mostly didn't work. So there's no sorting of waste. There are some kind of dump sites in this delta. So if there's a flooding, this might be washed away. You have littering or then direct dumping of waste into canals and rivers. And on the right side, you see the result at the shoreline of the Mekong Delta, a lot of plastic waste there at the shoreline. And also in Condau, the island I mentioned at the beginning, which is near the delta of the Mekong River. So what we did was to analyze one province. So the province of Long An is southerly of Ho Chi Minh City or former Saigon. So it's one of the provinces in the Mekong Delta. And so we analyzed the whole thing. That means we look which infrastructure is present there, how is the waste collected, how much waste is collected, what's the waste composition in specific areas, and then do some kind of calculations. What can we do with the waste when it's then separate, when we have a separate collection of the waste? What about the spendings, the running costs, but also about the income? So we found out that there might be an income from compost. So if we separate the organic fraction, there might be, or there is a significant income from the sale of compost. This is specific to that region there, so we can cover a part of the cost. When then, of course, the costs will rise, especially due to labor cost for the separate waste collection, and then develop a plan for these separate waste collection. Here, that's the practice we have in Tan Anh City, the provincial capital of Tan Anh province. It started last August. We have 2,400 households involved. So there is now a separate waste collection, but there has a lot of training to be done to the inhabitants, to the households, how to sort the waste, and a lot of organizational issues. So you have to buy specific carts. The streets are some kinds very narrow. So and then putting the carts on a truck, and this will be transported to a composting plant, and so the compost can be then made there in that plant. And we did a lot of monitoring to look how's the composition of the sorted waste, and how is the performance of the households. And at the beginning, it was not so good, but then a lot of training and a discussion with the inhabitants followed, and this improved a lot than the following weeks. But still, this is very cumbersome, very difficult to achieve. So you see, that's not so easy to solve the issue of plastic pollution, because you have to really change the whole structure in the waste management system, and this needs a lot of discussion and a lot of time. But from the policy side, the government is aiming for, in Vietnam, is aiming for separate waste collection. So this project then will feed in the experiences we have for, let's say, more national activities, more national discussion. We hope, together with a developing EPR system, that we will have at the end a separate collection, which will be then nearly complete, so that all the waste is collected and not ending somewhere else, and that we have a proper treatment of waste. But we need several years to do this. So I will finish now. So I hope I could provide some insight here in our activities. You see, so from a global agreement to activities on the ground, but what we are trying to do is to, of course, to link these activities together and hope at the end that there will be some kinds of result. So thank you very much for listening. I will stop my screen sharing, and I guess we can discuss further issues later on.